floor is covered with blood. There's body parts, out of like all these biohazard bags everywhere. And I just remember a very distinct thought of, I'm in the fucking movie Saw.
Welcome back to Never Left Behind, the podcast. Today we are joined with Nikki Selby, who served in the United States Navy with search and rescue land, and then eventually as a critical care and trauma ER nurse while being deployed to Afghanistan. We talk about her military career and where her life has taken her since, including supporting the HunterSeven Foundation, becoming skydiving certified, long-range shooting, and still actively working as a nurse in her community. This is an incredible episode with Nikki, filled with inspirational topics and the occasional raunchy moments that had us entertained throughout the entire show. Real stories, real heroes, for a real cause. This is Never Left Behind, the podcast. Hey, Nikki, how are you tonight?
I'm well. How are you?
We're doing great. We are really excited to have you on. I know it's been a while since we last saw you, and I know it was personally with me meeting up with you, taking your photo for the book, and we were kind of talking about hinting at doing a podcast with you, and I know you've been on quite a few yourself, so thank you for taking the time to join us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Of course.
So I know Bo was able to spend some time and learn a little bit about your background, but I'm very intrigued and interested kind of where you grew up and what really inspired you to join the military and the Navy particularly.
Well, it's not a real exciting story, but I grew up in Las Vegas, Nevada. My dad was Air Force and he retired there. So I think I was 8 when we moved there, and then just spent the rest of my childhood in that location. Why did I join the Navy? So I actually played tennis most of my life, and I thought that would have gotten me at least a college scholarship. That was sort of the plan. Played competitively. My sophomore year, I ended up kind of hanging out with the wrong crowd and screwed up a little bit, and just didn't really care about school. Was ditching classes all the time, and ended up failing that year, which then got me kicked off the tennis team, which just sort of started this whole chain reaction of, not really playing tennis anymore, not doing any of the things that I was on track to do. And I finally got my crap back together my junior year, or towards the end of my junior year. And it was too late for anything regarding tennis. And during my senior year, it was one of those like, oh, what do I do with my life?
Like we all have.
Military. So, because my dad was pretty adamant, like, you're not staying here past 18, figure it out.
Yeah.
And so my brother had joined 3 years before me because he sort of screwed up in high school as well. And so, yeah.
You kind of have a similar background as Dan and I. Dan was better in school than I was. I think he cared more about it, but I know that was his excuse for leaving the area out in the desert in California where we grew up. And mine was kind of the same. My sophomore year is when I really started slacking. And it's interesting how the paths have kind of gone down that route where we all either do bad in high school and join the military, or we do bad and try and leave the town we grew up in.
Find some way to get out of there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think anyone really, not to talk badly about the military, but I don't think anyone aspires to I'm going to enlist in the military. That's what I've always wanted to do with my life. So I think a lot of us always, we end up in that position where it's, I guess I have nothing better to do.
Yeah. So I'm interested why the Navy and not the Air Force or something else.
The recruiting station in Vegas had all 4 services in one building, and my intentions were to talk to the Air Force recruiter. And when I went to his office, he was just very can't be bothered, which I thought was strange because, you expect recruiters to be like, come on in, let me, lie to your face that you'll join our service. No, he was like, I'm going to lunch right now. So, if you want to come back later, I guess we can talk. I was just very turned off by that. So I was like, okay. So I walked down, and the next office was the Navy, and my brother had joined the Navy. I don't really know why he did that instead of the Air Force, but kind of poked my head in their office and I was like, hey, can we talk? And they're like, oh yeah, come on in. And there were like 2 or 3 guys in there and very friendly and, what I guess expected the recruiters to be like. And that was it. So
yeah. I feel like there's 4 in one office. That's like walking into a car dealership.
Yeah, it really was. And that's
God, that'd be like so like stressful, like just constantly recruiting. Like, no, come join us
in Yucca Valley, where Bo
we had 2
grew up extensively your entire life, and then I spent several years there. But there was the Marine Corps and the Army recruiters right next to each other, and it's really funny because they would always hang out outside and like try and poach each other's recruits like as they were walking in. So I could just imagine with 4 in the same place what that would be like.
You walked in the Army and then I went in the Marine Corps one. Yeah. And I wanted to join the Marines.
Well, I walked past the Marine Corps office and he was like, hey, and I was like, nope, I'm good.
I'm already taken.
Not going there.
No, so, not interested.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess in my mind, I thought Marine Corps or Marine Corps, which they are. I mean, they're hardcore, physically in shape. I was not. So, not that I wasn't in shape, but I just didn't have that, I didn't like to run. I didn't like to, wasn't doing push-ups and sit-ups and all that craziness. So like, yeah, not for me.
So, and obviously, you started out as search and rescue. Yes. What were some of the like kind of tasks that you were responsible for while you're doing that?
Well, I mean, so I didn't start out as search and rescue. I started out as a general corpsman, just a general.
Oh, excuse me. Okay.
Yeah, just a quad 0 corpsman. And my intentions when I joined were just to do 5 years, get the college, GI Bill, and then be done with it. And at my first duty station, somehow I heard about SAR corpsman, and I'm like, what is that? I was kind of intrigued with that. And this is back 96, 97.
Okay.
And asked my recruiter, or not my recruiter, I asked my career counselor about it. And she was like, oh, there's no females. You can't do this. Which I thought was strange. And I was like, that it's not a combat role. So I don't see why can't females do it, search and rescue. And she was like, well, there aren't any females in it. And I said, well, that's not, doesn't mean that you can't do it. So, and I don't know if you've ever heard any of my podcasts, I tell this story all the time, that's, don't take no for an answer, because I decided to challenge her on that. And I was, junior enlisted, she was senior enlisted, and I could have just taken her word for it, turned around and walked the other way, and my life would be completely different to this day. But I asked her to look up the instruction, and I wanted to see with my own eyes that it said no females were allowed. And so she did that, came back and was like, well, it doesn't say that you can't. So I guess if you want to, which at that point, I did say, I wasn't that big of a PT freak or working out all the time. I probably should have realized there weren't females in there for a reason, but that's just not how my brain works. So I was like, okay, yeah, I'll do this, and applied for it. And then that's how I got into the search and rescue world. So
well, that's like a lot of physical conditioning, though, I would imagine, search and rescue, where you're training like in the water and all that stuff, where you're treading waves. And
so there's a difference between, and a lot of people don't realize this, there's the search and rescue corpsman, which is an actual NEC or MOS or whatever you guys call it. And then there's rescue swimmers. So those are 2 different things.
Okay.
I actually ended up being a rescue swimmer, but I didn't have to do it. A lot of people think, oh, if I go SAR corpsman, I have to go through rescue swimmer school, which is a completely different thing. So, but the SAR corpsman program was pretty physically demanding, and I found that out right away when I started training. Back then, so now they actually have a pipeline to go through the training. Back then it was, you got selected, you went through air crew school in Pensacola, which was, I think, 4 weeks, which was a lot of swimming and conditioning, not as intense as rescue swimmers, but you were still doing a lot of water stuff. You're doing a lot of running, calisthenics. For me, it was the first time I actually, boot camp was like, it wasn't that difficult, but that school was the first time I was like, this is a little hard. I probably should have prepared a little bit better for this. And then you go on to your next duty station and you do OJT. There's a whole qualification syllabus, and then that's how you get qualified. And so there's
a lot to it.
What's that?
There's a lot to it. That's like a whole nother kind of area that I'm not used to hearing about.
Yeah, it's a big back then it was a big syllabus that we had to complete at our duty station. I chose China Lake, California. It's great duty station out there. I wanted to go. So my first duty station was in Florida, and my family was all on the West Coast. So I wanted to get closer, and that was the only option. And I didn't. I was like, "What's China Lake?" And like,
it sounds interesting.
Yeah. It does sound nice.
Real interesting. It's kind of like Yucca Valley, I'm sure.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
It's very similar. I think all those areas like Lake Elsinore, Paris, China Lake, all those areas are very similar to like Yucca Valley, just the high desert.
Well, and it's such an attracting name. You're like, oh, China Lake, it's got to be this beautiful, green, wonderful place to go hang out. No.
Well, it's like, there's probably a big lake there. Yeah.
Yep.
The name of Yucca Valley says it all.
Yeah.
It's like Yucca. Yeah. Why do you want to go there? But so, and then go on, continue. Sorry.
Well, yeah. So China Lake was what we call an inland SAR unit in mountain rescue. Again, didn't do a lot of research, didn't really know the difference. I was terrified of heights, or I still am terrified of heights, but I was really terrified of heights. And the difference with being either over water or being inland, which that China Lake is inland, is that over water, the rescue swimmers go down for the patient. Mm-hmm. Over land, the corpsman goes down, and we go down via rappelling. Mm-hmm. So when I first checked in, I had a few obstacles. The first thing that happened was my officer in charge so we were attached to the clinic there because we were corpsmen, but our primary duty was at the squadron with the helicopters. And I go to check in, and the officer in charge is like, I don't think females should be out there, so I'm not gonna let you train. I was like,
jeez.
Huh? I was there to complete the syllabus, and that was my NEC. This was a C school for me. So it was like, that wasn't really an option for him to say, I'm not going to let you train. Yeah. But in his mind, he was like, I'm just going to absorb you for the clinic, and you're just going to stay here now. And that was not what I was billeted for. And so again, I was, I'm an E4, pretty new E4, and this is a O4. There was no equal opportunity, people or whatever. I had really nowhere to turn to. I ended up calling the enlisted technical leader, which happens to be, I don't know if you read my post, but he actually passed away a couple of days ago. And
I did see that.
So that was him. And I wasn't sure when I called him, because he was in a completely different part of the country, if he was going to agree with that. Like, I don't want you in our community. So we're not going to let you train, or if he was going to support me. He ended up supporting me and making a few phone calls and getting it to where I could train. So that was the first little obstacle. And it was the first time I'd ever, I guess, been discriminated against. It never occurred to me that was a thing. And when he was like, I don't believe you should go out there, I don't think females should be out there, it was just like, wow, that's really, that
I wonder
exists.
if it's because they haven't had anybody else, like other females, and you were kind of the first one to come up.
Yeah, there was one, I want to say there was one before me, but during my time, there wasn't any until the end of my time in that community. So yeah, I don't know where the one went or where she was stationed, but yeah, these guys had never really dealt with that before. So
gotcha.
So that was the first obstacle. And then I go to meet the one guy that was there at the time to start training, and he's like, hey, I got you set up for rappel school. And I was like, for what? He's like, yeah, you got to go to rappel school. And I said, oh, no. I thought we stay up in the helicopter when we have patients. And he was like, no, not over land. We go down for the patient. So I was like, oh, I don't do that. And he was like, oh, okay, well then you're not gonna be doing this job.
Oh, shit.
So, just went through all this mess of trying to get cleared for training. And then now I'm like, okay, now I have to go through rappel school. So they sent me down to Pendleton to get rappel qualified. And we used a tower first. It's like a metal tower. I don't know if you guys are, my legs were shaking that tower. And there was a guy down below that was belaying. He's like, just go.
I've probably seen that tower that you were on in Pendleton.
Yes.
But it's an interesting base. At least it's pretty out there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. But yeah, so I do that, and then, I have to go down. the helicopter a few times, got qualified, and got over a little bit my fear of heights, and that was it. So, but yeah, to answer your question in a very long way, the duties is that we were there to support that base, which had, we had 2 squadrons. We had an EOD unit, or we had EOD that went up and trained a lot. And then we also would support the surrounding community because there's a lot of hiking, a lot of different things that go on. We'd have a lot of little planes that would crash into the mountains. And so go and search for those guys. And yeah.
Did you guys ever do any search and rescue and help with like wildfires and things like that as well? Or was it mostly just, lost hikers, injured hikers, and plane crashes?
It was mostly
like
the injured hikers. When I was there, we didn't do any wildfire stuff. I'm sure if it was called for, they would, if it was near their area, they would do it.
Injured hikers, is that like animal attacks and stuff like that? Falling off cliffs?
There are people that do fall off. I fly actually sometimes with the LA sheriffs, their Air 5, which is their helicopter is unique because they're all tactical. They had to be SWAT first, and then they go to the helicopters. So they're a tactical mix of tactical and search and rescue, and they're all paramedics. But yeah, we get up there. We get a lot of hikers that end up falling pretty long distances, which is like, what are you guys doing up here?
I like to ask the childish questions. I want to know who got attacked by like mountain lions and stuff.
Yeah, no animal attacks that I've ever encountered, but lost hikers, you get that a lot. You get people who fall, or even if they just, injure their ankle or something, if they can't walk out, they're kind of screwed. So, there has to be a search and rescue unit of some sort to come get them. So
I want to know how people get lost in Joshua Tree National Park. That to me makes no sense whatsoever. All the time.
Oh, yeah.
Really?
Yeah. I would say, no joke, like once every other week. There's someone that goes missing or someone that ends up stranded.
Either. But at the same time, out there, if it's the middle of the day, you don't understand how to track the sun, and you don't know how to like identify a landmark and just keep walking that way. Some people just don't understand how to.
It could be. I mean, not to be brutal to those people, but I just feel like there's most of that park, you can hear cars. Like if you go to like a nearby rock pile and climb up to the top, you can hear like nearby traffic driving around like a mile away, and you could see the surrounding towns.
I didn't think it was that big. I haven't been there before, but
it's no, if you hike into it, it's pretty big. Yeah, it's pretty big.
Oh.
Like you can, like there's two main entrances. One's from the Joshua Tree side, and then there's one from the southern side,
like Twin Palms Marine Base.
Yep. And so actually, there's a third then.
Yeah.
And then there's one further south than that,
like Indio, Coachella Valley.
Yep. But you can get lost. You can get lost in there, but it's surprising that people do get lost.
Yeah. I like what you were saying. I like that the military like forces you. Like you went in, you're like, I'm not doing that. And they're like, well, you're not gonna have a job. Like I like that they make you face your fears in a way.
Oh yeah.
And we need more of that. Like I feel like a lot of people kind of give up on these easy things where it's like, hey, you have to do this, and they're like, nah, I'm not gonna do it.
Yeah, it's my career. I feel like I've found myself in a lot of those positions. I think a lot of it has to do with my personality as well, to challenge myself. And
yeah,
I mean, even though I said, I'm not going to do this, I would have regardless, because that's just me. Like I don't turn anything down really. So, but my initial thought was, no. Nope. Not going to hang from a rope.
So after you became an officer, then I know your military it shifted into critical care and trauma and ER nurse, correct?
Yes. So
what was that like, kind of like on your deployments overseas?
What? I'm sorry, say that again.
What was that like for you, like being in that position with, both your deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan?
So I didn't deploy to Iraq. I went to Iraq after I got out and helped with the nonprofit organization.
That's what it was.
Yes. I did go to Afghanistan. I did go on a Westpac, and we were in the Middle East area, but I wasn't in Iraq when I was in the actual military.
Okay.
But yeah, so after doing the SAR thing, I did end up getting qualified as a rescue swimmer. Kind of got to a point where it was like, what am I going to do next? Because there isn't much follow on with search and rescue. Like, where do you go from there? So decided to put a commissioning program in, or pack it in for the nurse corps, got accepted. They sent me to school, got commissioned as a nurse, did a few years in the hospital, and then got to Pendleton. I went to the hospital in Pendleton. And at the time, as you know, OEF was kicking off, or it was actually, we were pretty deep into it.
Yep.
Critical care nurses were really in demand. And we already as a community are pretty low in manning. And so we were just getting, the first thing I did was Haiti. So the Haitian earthquake happened in 2010, and they gave me a 24-hour notice to go. I got the phone call. I was supposed to go on a night shift, and I woke up to all, like, my supervisors had called me, and I was like, oh, what happened? Did I get in trouble? And this was a Thursday, and they said, well, you've been watching the news, right? I said, yes. And she was like, okay, don't come in tonight. We need you here tomorrow. And I said, okay, what am I doing? And they're like, well, we're sending you to Haiti tomorrow. I said, well,
oh, geez.
Wait, what? I was like, what do you mean you're sending me to Haiti tomorrow? Like, I what? And she was like, yeah, I know it's, short notice. I'm like, yeah, it's a little short notice. I mean, at the time of 3 kids, the 2 little ones were babies. And so it was like, I can't just like walk out of my house in 24 hour, without really ever expecting that. Cause that just wasn't, it wasn't like I was special operations and you just expect that you're going to get called out and whatever. But, wasn't expecting it, and went to work the next day, and I was like, this has got to be a joke. There's no way the Navy can get their shit together like that to send a group of us out to Haiti in a 24-hour notice.
Hours.
Yeah. But showed up, and we got briefed by our commanding officer, and it didn't end up being 24 hours, but it did end up being 48 hours. So I was on my way that weekend to Haiti for an unknown amount of time. That was the other thing. It was like, well, how long should I plan for this? And it was, well, could be 6 months, could be less than that, who knows? So so left on a 48-hour notice to Haiti for potentially 6 months, which ended up being 3 months. But that's still quite a long time to just pick up and leave everybody.
Oh, for sure.
So I came back from there. That was a whole interesting deployment, or whatever you want to call it. I mean, we got there pretty shortly after the earthquake happened, and it was just, lots of trauma. We were on a amphibious warfare ship that had a lot of operating rooms and holding areas for patients. And so dealt with all of that. And that, and again, I was out there for 3 months, but it was 3 months of nonstop trauma patients and, little sleep, never really quite got adjusted to what was going on. So,
well, there's a ton of people affected by that too.
Well, the entire country.
Yeah, I remember like it was in shambles for a while from that, like people getting pulled out of rubble, and just it affected the whole area.
Oh yeah, it was bad. It was terrible. So, get back from there, and so at that point I was considered a critical care nurse because I had just started in the ICU at Pendleton, but I really wasn't qualified or trained yet, because Pendleton's a smaller hospital, and what we do is we send our critical care nurses to Balboa to get the actual ICU training. Well, I never made it there before Haiti, so got sent to Haiti as a critical care nurse without the critical care training. So that was interesting too. I come back and they're like, okay, we're going to send you to Balboa to get your training. I was like, oh, that's nice. Thanks. So I go down to Balboa for a couple of weeks. I get another phone call, and my division officer was like, hey, we have this deployment. And I was like, well, and what she had told me with the Haiti thing is if I didn't try to resist it, that would count as my deployment for the year. Because as I said, critical care nurses were in demand, and we were getting deployed at least once a year, if not more than that. And so they would try to, if they deployed you, they tried to leave you alone for a year. So she was like, this will count regardless of how long it is. It'll count for your deployment for the year. We'll leave you alone. So again, this is like a few weeks later, and she was like, well, we have this deployment. And I said, well, wait a second. You told me if I went to Haiti without a hassle that was going to count. We're only about a month out of there. So like this, I should be good. And she was like, well, we just don't have anybody. It's like, all right, well, what's this? And she says, well, it's with the Marine Corps. You're going to go as a, part of a resuscitation surgical team to Afghanistan for 10 months.
Oh, shit.
It's like, okay. So turn around and I go do that. I got a little bit more critical care training, thank God. But yeah, went to Afghanistan. We were part of a ground damage control surgical team. If you're not familiar with that, that's like, it's a role 2. So role 1 would be like the point of injury, the people that are there when it happens. Role 2, so we were, by doctrine, we can set up a, makeshift type of surgical unit, pop up a tent or wherever, if we acquire a hard structure, we can do surgery in that tent or building or whatever it is that we are. Not to fix you, but just to stop, if we can't stop the bleeding through any other means, then we will go in and try to stop that hemorrhaging or whatever it is that's actively killing you at the time. Patch you up and then throw you on the back of a helicopter to the role 3, which is the bigger hospitals within the theater that has more capability, more specialties. And so I was part of the role 2. Just we were going around Helmand Province. If there were known operations that were going to happen, they would try to get us as close to them as possible. And then that way we would take in the casualties to try to maintain or stabilize their life and then get them off to the next role.
Where is role 3? Is role 3 technically on like the big FOBs, or is that like out of country?
Bagram, Kandahar.
The role 3s, in Afghanistan was Kandahar, Bastion is a role 3. Bagram, Dwyer was for a little while, and they downsized that when we were there. But initially I was at COP Pain, Combat Outpost Pain, which was down near Afghanistan or Pakistan. So the thing with the role 2 is that great idea. So we were pushing advanced providers forward to try to stabilize patients. And that's why I think a lot of people came home that probably wouldn't have otherwise.
Yeah.
What they forgot about was the transport part of that, because you had dust off and you had PJs, we had MERT teams. They would go to the point of injury. What their jobs are more of, is maintaining the airway, patching up whatever they could, and then getting them to the role, advanced care. Well, we were the advanced care. So we're out there, we take the patient in, or we're doing surgery. So we put them on a ventilator, we start blood, we start medications, all this, different things. They would come out and they would be on a vent, they'd be getting blood, they'd be getting a lot of advanced critical care stuff that at the time the dust off medics were not trained for. So when we called in the helicopter to transport these patients to the role 3, the dust off medic would be like, oh yeah, we don't do that. So then it was, hey, random nurse on the ground team, get on the back of the helicopter and transport this critical patient by yourself to the next role of care. And I was like, this is not how this works. This is not, none of us are trained for this. I volunteered to go because I was familiar with helicopters, being search and rescue, so very comfortable in helicopters. But mind you, I was a brand new critical care nurse and doing critical care on the back of a helicopter, a dust out, 60 by myself without a team. So like when you think of like CCAT teams and those, they have a whole team with them that they're going and transporting with. I am now by myself trying to do this with sometimes a little pen light between my teeth because the helicopter would be darkened or whatever. And I remember my first transport. It was at night and it was a guy who had bilateral amputations. And I'm in this squat position in the back of this 60 trying to keep this guy alive. And I just remember this thought of like, what did I do to get to this point in my life?
They like threw you into it.
Yeah, it was,
like, again,
quick. Yes, just thrown into this shit, really not expecting, didn't know what I was doing. The other thing too was that being part of a crew. So when I was enlisted, I was part of a crew, right? So I had all the equipment, all the gear that I needed. Well, in this case, I was technically a passenger. So the guys didn't bring me a headset, nothing. So then I couldn't communicate with the crew. I'm doing hand signals to the crew chief and whatever. I'm completely blinded, don't know what's going on.
Oh man.
Trying to keep this guy alive. trying to manage this vent that I've never managed a vent before in my life up to that point. So, I've got bags of blood going. I've got to keep them paralyzed. I got to keep them sedated. I got to keep them all this stuff, all these medications that I've never worked with. And literally, as we were walking, as walking out to the helicopter, I grabbed my anesthesiologist and I was like, "What do I give him to keep him down?" And he like gave me, as we're walking to the helicopter, this little crash course on paralytics and sedation medications to keep this guy down. And it's just like,
how do they keep everything stable in those helicopters, like with the vibrations?
They don't.
It's all loose. Like,
yeah, I mean,
oh yeah, we literally put him in the litter and just set it down on the deck of the helicopter, and I'm in a squat position right next to him. I mean, they weren't tied down or anything.
And those are the UH-60s that have the doors on or doors off?
The doors were on at the time.
Okay. Yeah.
So I never flew in Afghanistan with the doors off. They always had the doors on. So they could pin them back, but yeah, we always had them closed. So
yeah, I was like, wondering, like, you can't fasten all that stuff down. Like if the helicopter tilts or anything like that, everything's going to go to one side.
So
Velcro.
Technically, yes, everything is supposed
Velcro.
to
Velcro.
But yeah, during those times, because no one really thought about all this, no, they were not. I had a getter's belt that I was attached to, but yeah, the patient was kind of just, on the litter on the deck of the helicopter. So yeah, that was what I did in Afghanistan. Just the first couple were just a disaster. It didn't, again, there's no training for this. If you do this in the civilian sector, which I have now, is a whole pipeline of training. When I flew for Mercy Air, they would send you to Denver for a whole 2-week course of just learning all of this stuff. And then you would go back and you had a preceptor that you had to be next to you until they felt you were comfortable to take a patient by yourself, which the average time was about 6 months, for training. This is like literally, hey, nurse, I don't know what you actually do because a nurse is not a nurse is not a nurse. So, common time, like people who are not in the medicine field, is they think a doctor can do everything, right? They can do surgery and they can do emergency medicine. Well, no, if you have a dermatologist, like that's not they don't know anything about that. It's the same thing with nursing. We have different aspects of nursing. So some people are labor and delivery nurses. Some people are critical care. Some people are, they work in a clinic. They've never seen any type of critical patients or whatever. Early Iraq, we were doing this to nurses that were pretty new as nurses, just to start with. And again, if you do this in the civilian sector, you have to have at least 3 years of experience in critical care medicine before you can even get on a helicopter. Oh, wow. So now we have these brand new nurses, new to nursing. A couple of them were L&D nurses or postpartum nurses. So this is like very basic nursing. And they were throwing them on the back of a helicopter to fly these critical patients in Iraq. We did that a lot. So knowing that information, knowing what I went through, I came back with a vengeance because I was pissed. I was like, you do not do this to people. Like you do not, it's like throwing a Marine infantry guy into combat, but oh yeah, we forgot to actually like train you on how to use your rifle or how to use anything, but we're just gonna put you out there, see what happens. So it really, for the medical community and the military, a lot of the time we don't get that training for those type of areas. We are in a hospital, which is really no different than being in a civilian hospital. So that to me is no different than taking a civilian nurse, hey, we're going to send you to Afghanistan in a combat area. Sorry, you didn't really get the training for this, but we're going to, good luck. And then, not to mention like your environment that you're not used to. Now you don't have the resources that you're used to. So you don't have the supplies, you don't have, all the perks that you get in the hospitals and all the technology and everything else. So you're trying to figure that all out on your own, which my first experience with that was in Haiti, when I don't know the last time they did inventory on those ships, but it felt like a lot of the equipment came from, World War II or I mean, it was just stuff that was like, what do you do with this? Like, I've never even seen this type of equipment. So, you don't get any type of training. You're just kind of learning as you go.
Well, it's one of those things too that it's unfortunate that this happens in the military, but at the same time, you gain a lot of skills that maybe you wouldn't get otherwise if you were just in a standard hospital setting, like the thriftiness and the ability to craft something that, you're basically using a different type of bandage from what it's supposed to be for a different use, just to make do and like come up with solutions that nobody even thought were possible. So I imagine there was a lot of benefit to it, but not necessarily in the way you would want it.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely changed my mindset, and it changed how what I'm comfortable with now, and, just how I do things. But that's all experience. And that's, when I do a lot of teaching in this area and in other areas, it's like, you can't teach experience. I can tell you all day long, and I'll tell you all my lessons learned, in hopes that, you can change that. Or if you're in that situation, you can, take what I tell you and maybe do the right thing. But, you just can't teach that experience. And I realized that when I came back, because I started a training program for the the medical battalions with the Marine Corps on this, because we didn't have any formal training. There's one course called the Joint and Route Care course in Alabama that does teach you this stuff, but it's a joint course for all the services. It's hard to get seats. It's, there's no days of flying. So it's just ground didactics. So I was like, this is bullshit. Like, we have to have training. We have to teach people. And then I realized as I was training people, I can't, it's really hard to teach what I know, what I've been through, to people that just haven't been through it, or, had to do things on the fly or figure out, different equipment or anything like that. So,
Yep.
Yeah, it's a really difficult thing to teach something, especially oftentimes like the adaptability and things, like, because you try and give like examples of like, this is what I had to do in this situation. This is how I was able to achieve it. But until somebody's in that situation for themselves and they have to actually problem solve and figure it out, like it just, I have the same problem. It feels like it never sticks. You know what I mean? It's like, it's like you tell them and then it's like, all right, they probably forgot it. Unless it's something that's doctrine and they have to study and it's like in textbooks and things, then it's probably something that, you just learn from experience.
And then you're like, well, I might as well do it if they do it wrong. So then you're just doing more work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's when I came back and I started this training program. I try to make it as realistic as possible. And the difference was I would get airtime for the guys, and then we put them in the helicopter, because that was the thing. It's like, there's a lot of ground schools for this, or people trying to teach this stuff. But unless you're in the helicopter and you can't hear and you can't talk to each other because you have to scream over, the noise or whatever, it's different. Like, you can't teach that stuff. So, they have to be immersed in that environment to really understand what it's like. Because you'll see them like trying to teach on the ground and like, okay, pretend like, you can't hear. And then you've got guys like grabbing the stethoscope and putting like, you're not going to hear anything with the stethoscope. So it's like, but they don't really, it's like, they don't know, because they aren't in the environment. So they have no idea. But every time I've taught anything on ground, with a helicopter, trying to like recreate a helicopter, every single time they grab their stethoscope, and it's like,
that's
it's
gonna
not
be so
their fault.
stressful.
I mean, they don't know. So
blindfold them, roll them in the dirt a few times, and then just scream in their ears while they're trying to assess a patient.
Yeah. We've tried to do like, big fans and things like that with the noise, or, record like an engine noise and then blast it on the speakers or something. But it's still just, there's just nothing like the real thing, putting them in a helicopter. And so we did get, a bit of support with the Marine Corps, and we would get some airtime. We'd throw the guys on there and then bring their patients and the dummies and whatever else, and then, have them bleed out in the helicopter. We can do now type of thing.
Jeez. So, it might be some of the experiences that you felt. I want to bring Tommy into this. So our last guest we just had on was talking about, he made a comment to where he had both of his legs blown off. And when he was getting wheeled away, he said he came to conscience and he was like, am I still good? And they're like, what do you mean? He's like, is it still there? And they're like, yeah, it's still there. So he's talking about, his dick and all that.
His dick.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And is that like a normal thing?
Do you read my posts?
No.
You haven't read my post? Oh, okay.
I'm just curious.
Yeah, I talked about, I was on Andy Stump's podcast, I think in Microlens, and I talked about that particular thing because at one point in Afghanistan, so that were the common injuries were the bilateral amputations of the leg and then the genital injuries. And a lot of it, my theory is you guys are so freaking weighted down. They put so much on you guys that if you stand on an IED, instead of getting blown maybe to one side, maybe having, one side affected, you're taking the entire brunt of that explosion through your core. Because these guys have like 100 pounds on them or some craziness. And so that was the common injuries. And so the one time, which, I always get questions like, mentally, are you affected? And I'm like, I really don't think so. Although now I'm kind of like, maybe, because I can't sleep. Like last night I got an hour of sleep, and that's like my common thing is 3 hours of sleep every night. I don't feel like I'm affected, but who knows? But I did have one time in Afghanistan. This is what I always talk about is we're in the OR.
Sorry to make you to repeat yourself over and over then.
No, it's fine. But in Bastion, so we were in transit from Payne to Delaram, and we spent, I think it was a few days in Bastion. And because we were doing surgical stuff, I wasn't a surgical nurse, and neither were the nurses that were with me. And so our surgeon was like, hey, why don't you go to the OR and get some like OR time in there, since, we were helping them in the tents when we were out there on our own. And so the day that we got to the OR, and I remember we started at like 6 a.m, I think, was the same day that 3-5 took over singing. And if you're familiar with that, they got freaking it was bad. And we didn't know what was going on at the time. So the OR in Bastion is a 6-bed OR that was open bay. So you could see all of the beds. So not like your typical OR, where it's just a single room, one OR bed. It was a big, huge space with all these beds. And as part of the surgical team, we had to, we would stand behind the line when a patient came in, because we'd let the ER guys do their thing. So then we would then our surgeon would go through and pick who the worst people were, and then we'd bring them back to the OR table. There was a point where I was like, if I see one more fucking 20-year-old without their dick, I'm gonna lose my shit. So the next guy that comes in, he comes in, we're all standing there behind the line. I'm looking for his fucking dick. This kid's better have his dick. Jeez. And I look, one leg was already gone, one leg was kind of dangling, but I see his dick, and I'm like, oh, thank God, he's got a dick. Like, oh, man. Great, whatever. We end up taking him back to our bed, and I'm helping my surgeon cut off his other leg, because it was just like, it wasn't salvageable. And I'm holding this as he's like sawing away at the leg. And there's another surgeon that's going through like the abdomen, the chest area. And I see him pick it up and cut it off. And
what?
I lost my shit. I lost my shit. I was like, what the fuck are you doing? And he's like, there's nothing here. There's nothing. So what I had seen was just the skin of what it was. And
like the shape.
Heel of his boot had blown into his, like all the way through up into his abdomen. He like pulls the heel of the boot out. And it like shredded his urethra inside. And I didn't see that when he came back. And
so that's why they remove it, is because the internal part of it is just, it's corrupt.
Yeah, there was just some skin that I was looking at. I didn't realize that there wasn't like anything.
The heel of your boot? How does a rubber heel? Just the force of it? Yeah. The velocity of the blast?
You're standing on this IED, whatever, it blows everything up. It blew his leg off, the other leg off. The heel just went straight up and then just shredded the urethra, everything inside.
Jeez.
And lodged in his abdomen. So, but yeah, that was I was like,
my stomach hurts.
Holy shit. So I just posted a couple days ago. So there's this veteran meetup here in Carlsbad every Friday, and I got invited to one. And so I go to this thing. This was 2 weeks ago, and there's this guy there, and he's got, he's one leg's missing, one arm's missing, and like his fingers from his good hand are missing. So we're talking, and I was like, where did you get injured? And he said in singing, and he was an EOD tech. Brian Meyer, I don't know. He's got if you look at my post, that picture has been like circulated a lot, but he's basically in the picture, like bloody everywhere. It just happened. And he's smiling So anyway, we're talking, and he brought up that picture, and I was like, holy shit. And he was like, me being unfiltered, and I had a drink at this point. I was like, do you still have your dick?
That's like the conversation opener right there for everyone. Hey, you still got your dick?
Yeah. Right. Like, do you still have your dick? Because this is like really worn on me. Like, I think about these because we don't have our patients very long when we're in a damage control situation. And so I have no idea what happens to these guys afterwards. And it was really cool to talk to him because he's the first person I've talked to that, has made it through all this stuff. And I actually got to sit down and talk to you. But he was like, why do you think I'm smiling in the picture? I was like, oh, thank God.
That sounds exactly like Tommy's reaction. Yeah. When he found out that it like still worked, everything, he was good. I think he said after he got blown up, he was like trying to sit up and walk because he didn't realize what even happened. Yeah. And they like had to force him down and then carry him out. And he was like, sounds very similar. He's like that smiling guy, like, oh, I'm good. Like,
he's like, he said it. Yeah. I mean, he said it in the podcast. He's like, is my shit still there? Is my shit still there?
And we're good.
All right, we're good.
Yep. We would have we would get patients and their buddy who saw what went down would be like, is his junk still there? Does he still have his junk? Like everybody, everyone's concerned, which they should be. And that's why I said, like really bothered me when I would see him without
nurses in the background. Like,
well, all right. We would talk about it all the time because they started making us wear like crotch plates.
Oh yeah. Those little flaps.
But we're like, all right, Kevlar. That only helps if somebody's shooting straight at you, but it doesn't help you if you're getting blown up. Like, so we all like just threw them off to the side. We're like, we're not wearing this shit because it's not going to do anything for me.
It looks like an adult diaper.
No, it's even worse. Actually, what the worst part about it was when you would run around, it would flop and it would just be like sack tapping you the entire time you were running around, and it's the most uncomfortable thing in the world. So yeah everyone was like, we're not wearing these.
Man.
Yeah. So anyway, that's
that's crazy.
But yeah, thinking back on like, again, if you follow me on Instagram, I just posted that like a few days ago.
I do follow you. That's what's weird is I literally just saw your last post about the gentleman that passed away or one of the most recent posts the other day. And I didn't see that one.
Yeah, I posted that one. Actually, it was 2 weeks ago because it was right after I talked to him. Because I was just I was a little overwhelmed with the emotion of like being able to talk to somebody afterwards because I hadn't had that opportunity.
Is that what I've noticed is like we've had the pleasure of talking with like a lot of combat nurses or medics on or off the podcast, and I've noticed that a lot of you guys have a very dark sense of humor, and I'm curious, like, does that come from just being exposed to the shit on a daily basis?
Yeah, I mean, you gotta like when you're dealing with, again in that, when I was in that OR. So going back to that where I was, you were helping cut off this leg. When we finally cut it off, I remember at one moment I'm holding this kid's leg, which is the first for me. Like I was like, I've never actually held body parts before. Yeah. And I kind of turned around because I was kind of like, what do I do with this? And I like slip on blood. So like the blood's covered or the floor is covered with blood. There's body parts, out of like all these biohazard bags everywhere. And I just remember a very distinct thought of, I'm in the fucking movie Saw. Like I'm in a really bad movie with body parts everywhere. Like another moment of how did I get to this point in my life? Man. Like, it's just crazy. And so, when you're dealing with that all the time, and not just like the combat stuff, but like even nurses, like a level 1 trauma center, like you're dealing with shit all day long. And like, kids being injured all the time, which is the worst. Children being injured is terrible.
Yeah.
You have to, I think you just, there has to be some coping mechanism or you would absolutely lose your mind.
Well, you ended up there because you were a bad kid in high school. That's why. So kids listening, do good in school and you don't have to see body parts.
Here's my plug. Don't do drugs, kids, because that's kind of like I started. The bad stuff in high school was me experimenting with, not the greatest substances in life. But it
makes sense. It makes sense. The psychological aspect of it, of just having kind of like, it can't keep affecting you. If you're around it all the time, it's just kind of like, all right, this is my normal day. That I'm finding humor in that really fucked up situation.
To make light of a really shitty situation, because if you don't, like, you just can't process it properly.
No.
And so
you can't, and like not, especially one after another, after another,
Yeah.
after another. And when that's your life, when you go to work and like you're going to deal with shit, and we do actually still lose a lot of people. We lost a lot of nurses in Afghanistan, or not, but in both the wars, just to the mental health side of it. They one, and my theory is that, well, we didn't prepare these people at all. So again, take somebody who's supposed to be infantry, don't give them any of the tools, don't teach them how to use their equipment, and then throw them out in the middle of combat. Like, that's probably not going to go over so well. So, not that it's as dramatic for us, but it's kind of the same thing. Like, you've not prepared us for that environment at all. We don't have, like, whereas I think, if you're infantry, that's your job, is to train for that all the time. Like, that's your job. Our job is to be in a hospital and do hospital stuff until they need us. And then they pluck us out of there and they throw us into that environment with no preparation, no training, a lot of times no equipment. And so you're going to have people that can't. I am a master at compartmentalizing. So I feel like I do a lot better because I can just turn off things. I don't know. And it's gotten to a point now where it's a little concerning because I'm like, I should probably have some feelings towards a lot of things, but that I just don't have feelings towards. So it's a little concerning, but there are people that can't turn it off at all. And so it really affects them. And I actually had my senior nurse, because when I got back from Afghanistan, so that was back, Haiti to Afghanistan, then actually turned around and did a Westpac, because I was like, I guess I'm the only nurse in the Navy that can deploy right now. So it was like 2.5 years of deploying. My youngest had no idea who I was when I got back from Afghanistan. He screamed every time I got near him. So, because I left when he was a baby. So when I got back, he was
really
2, I think, almost 2. Yeah. So yeah, it did all that. And then my senior nurse pulled me in and she was like, why are you so different? And I was like, what do you mean? She was like, well, I'm just losing nurses left and right with, like, they're all going down to mental health. And I was just like, I don't think I'm different. But again, I just feel like when I'm, at that point, I'd already had 10 years of enlisted time. I was a little bit older, had more experiences, I've had a lot of stressful experiences up to that point. So I was like, I think I just am able to process things a little bit better. Not to say it's not going to haunt me later on in life. I don't know, but
I think some people are really good at those things. So like some people, like death doesn't affect them. It might, or it's like a stalled emotion. Like some people can go to a funeral and they break down, and then some people, it takes like a month later for it to just hit them.
Yeah, that's me. And like, I have to, like, I've actually had to pretend cry at funerals, and it's not that I'm not like sad. I've found that I don't have like the physiological reaction to what I'm thinking about, if that makes sense. Like, so it's kind of like, like the sky, why I got into skydiving is because I noticed I don't have that like fight or flight reaction anymore. The first time I noticed it, I was riding my motorcycle and literally almost got hit by a car, like came over into my lane, had to swerve out of the way. And I was like, wow, like in my brain, I'm like, shit, I almost died. And I was like waiting for like that rush of adrenaline and like maybe a little bit shaky or whatever. And like, I noticed, I'm like, oh, my heart rate is like not even elevated.
Yeah.
Just a little strange. So kind of like, oh, whatever.
Nikki's the kind of person who skydives with like no emotion on her face. She's just like straight face, not smiling.
I did it because, the second time was I was in my car, somebody cut me off. I did a full 360 in the middle of the 15 freeway, almost slammed into a wall and like stopped right before the wall, but turning face the other direction. And again, I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, what is wrong? I was like, what's wrong with me? And so, noticing this throughout the years, I was like, all right, well, surely because I'm terrified of heights. And I've always said I will never, ever, ever skydive, ever, ever. I was like, well, surely if I go skydiving, I am going to feel something. Like I'm going to have a reaction because I'm terrified. Like just standing, on a table is like, oh, that's high. so the first one was a tandem, and I'm attached to this guy, and I'm literally hanging out of the helicopter as he's about to, or the airplane as he's about to push us out. And I remember just staring down as I'm like dangling from him. I'm like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever, like, what the fuck am I doing? But again, I'm like, nothing. And we get, go out. And then I was like, okay, well, surely if I do it myself, I will have some kind of reaction. So I got qualified in skydiving.
Oh, wow.
And I still, like, as we go up, I have the same reaction every time I go. It's like, this is stupid. This is dumb. As the plane's going up to elevation. And there's always that moment where it kind of slows down and the door opens. And every time I'm like, nope, not doing it. Not fucking jumping out. And then it's like, okay, I'm jumping out. I get to the door, but I still, so my brain's going and it's like, this is dumb. Don't do this. You're about to die. But I don't have the physiological reaction. So I don't know. I don't know if this is related or like what the deal is.
I think so. Cause I do the same thing kind of, like for instance, several years ago, me and my wife, I hit a deer and like she freaked out about it. Like anybody would, you just hit a deer and like, it's a little scary because it was like coming over a hill. It was there in the middle of the road. Couldn't do anything to avoid it. Yeah. But me, I just like,
fuck.
I'm like, well, this sucks.
Yeah.
Like didn't freak out at all. No issue whatsoever. And the same thing, like if, I don't know, if somebody does something crazy on the road or if I like decide to go faster or whatever.
Yeah.
My heart rate probably doesn't even budge at all. And I'm just like,
and
meh.
And that's so I went on my first hunting trip in December and every single person it was an organization, hunter recruitment project, just a little thing out there.
Was it bow hunting or a long rifle?
It's rifle, long rifle. So their project is pairing new hunters up with a mentor. And then you go out on this, it's a private ranch. And, everyone had said like, oh yeah, when I was about to kill my first deer, I like was a little shaky and excited and, which I think is a normal reaction, right? You're about to kill a living thing. Nothing for me. Like I killed 2 of them back to back. And my mentor was like, holy shit. Like, he was all excited and like jumping up. And I was like, oh yeah, cool. It was just like,
you're a murderer.
And I'm like, oh my God, maybe I'm an sociopath. Shit. I mean, I was very happy. And and again, like in my brain, I'm like, oh, this is exciting. This is cool. But I was just like, meh.
Yeah.
Cool.
I think some people have just different ways of showing it. I can relate to that sense where like, I remember the first time I went hunting with a mentor of mine who kind of taught me the basics of it. I didn't have a reaction to it. Like I didn't get grossed out. I didn't feel bad for it. And that sounds fucked up. It was more like me realizing the beauty of it, of taking an animal's life.
Right.
And understanding like the basics of like field dressing it there and saying a prayer and all that. But I just, some people, I think they get really affected or they cry or whatever. And I just kind of shut off.
I do too. Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly what I felt. Just, I know like, and it was, again, the same thing is that, you do this for like the sustenance part. This isn't just for fun or, killing things. It's, the whole, like for me, I wanted to learn. So, cause this world's getting really freaking crazy. I want to be able to like, if I gotta like, provide food, I can do this. So, that's my whole point of it. But I just thought, I don't know, like I'm killing something. Like
it's interesting how, and not even to segue the conversation, but how you said like things are kind of crazy, based on some people's perspectives. But I remember hearing friends of mine that were like super against guns or hunting or any of that like a year or two ago, when I think it was like right when COVID happened. I think it was during the pandemic when all the grocery stores are going crazy. Yeah. They were like trying to apply to get their like license for like a gun permit or whatever. And I was like, you're too late. Like all the stores were emptied out and it's just crazy. Cause it's, I think it's important to have those things, but
I have a friend that works at a gun store and he's just like, oh yeah, you got all these people who never ever thought about owning a gun that are now trying to buy guns and and then they don't even realize. It's like, what do you mean you're out? And it's like, there's nothing.
So
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned the organization that you went hunting with. I'm curious
Yes.
to kind of to talk more about, your life after your service and after retiring from the military. Obviously you and I met through a mutual connection, Chelsea, with HunterSeven Foundation. How did you get involved with her and that organization?
So they reached out to me right when they were pretty much starting, which was around 2018.
Yeah, they've been around for a little while.
Yeah. And so they reached out and asked if I wanted to support, and just, they were like, oh, well, send you some shirts if you can just talk about it, if you like what we're doing. And so read about it, the whole burn pit thing, which, you kind of hear that stuff, but you don't really think about what the effects are on us afterwards.
What is that for people listening that don't know, like the burn pits? Like, what is that kind of all about?
If you're deployed overseas, the burn pits are how we dispose of everything. And that goes from, every piece of trash to feces to medical waste, just everything. And they throw it in these pits and then they burn them. And they're usually not that far from where you're sleeping and, cohabitating, and you're breathing in all these fumes. And I know a lot of people that go over there, and myself included, are like, oh yeah, I'm breathing. You have the thought of like, this can't be good, but you just don't really think about it. Right.
Yeah.
But I've talked to many people who are like, oh yeah, as you're breathing in these fumes, your thought goes by is that's probably not the healthiest thing for us. But
it makes sense.
And it's, how it's like regulated here with like throwing plastics and all this stuff away. Over there, it's just throw it all, like batteries and jet fuel and like just all kinds of stuff. Right. So, and then you're breathing that in. And when you really stop and think about that, it's like, holy shit.
Yeah. So it's a cancer agent then.
Oh yeah. Like, so, in Baghdad, I was immediately next to like the major burn pits.
Yeah.
And, I remember talking about it every day. We were walking outside, and every time they were burning something more caustic, we were like, holy shit, you could feel it in your lungs. Like your lungs would be burning, and like there would be a green haze, and you would be like, yeah, this is definitely not good for any of us.
Yeah.
But it's like, okay, well, what do? It's not like you can move your base easily to somewhere else or anything like that. So what's not funny, actually, it's terrible, but I guess what was good is we talked about that and how horrible it was. And that was in, I think, 2008. So it wasn't even that big of a topic yet. And I think we got pretty lucky, because in 2011 is when 2011 is when somebody started really pushing for it. And I was lucky enough that our medics caught wind of it, pun intended, caught wind of it, and were able to write letters for all of us. So I have a letter, confirming that I was housed right next to a burn pit in 2009, 2008, 2009, something like that.
Yeah.
Well, there's like people that are now like years later getting symptoms from it. And
people will. Yeah. They're going to continue.
Well, I mean, these are things that, so, this stuff can like lay dormant, and then it rears its head at some point in your life. And that's what's dangerous about it. It's kind of, they call it the Agent Orange of our generation.
Yeah. Makes sense.
And how Chelsea started is, so HunterSeven is actually the call sign of the master sergeant that was in charge of her fiance's unit. And they had a conversation, her and her fiance, and he was like, yeah, I lost more friends here than I did overseas. And she assumed that he meant mental health. And he was like, no, cancer. Wow. And she was like, what? And so that's kind of how that ball got rolling, because she was like, well, that's weird that so many people from the same unit would have cancer. It's like, that's got to be an environmental thing. So that's when she kind of dove headfirst into all of this. And
it's cool work that she's doing. And I think people listening should definitely check them out, because I like follow their posts and it's pretty interesting. And I know when I was looking it up, I know there's like some people that feel controversial about it, but I mean, if you got guys and women come back that are getting cancer from it, there's got to be some kind of weird connection to all that stuff.
I mean, I lost a couple of doctors from my own, when I was over there to cancers and colon cancer, like lots of colon cancers too, which
really,
I'm an advocate for the screening, because colon cancer is highly curable if you catch it very early. And so that's why they implemented the colonoscopy screenings. But that doesn't start till you're 50. And so but we're seeing a lot more people in their 30s that are getting this colon cancer. And if you don't catch it until it's in stage 4, it's the most deadly cancer. So it's like, how about we screen for this, which is an easy colonoscopy, and catch it and save these guys' lives instead of putting them through, hell and dying from this in their 30s. It's crazy. I myself, because I had a person in my family who had colon cancer, and I kind of was like, well, I want to be screened. And it was like, no, you're not at the age. And I was just like, well, and if you don't, so some of the risk factors where they'll make an exception is if like an immediate family member has had colon cancer or polyps or anything like that, which, this person wasn't an immediate family member. So I just lied and said, yeah, I had an immediate family member that had colon cancer. And that was the only way they would screen me. But I'm like, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
That, I should
for
be
such
able
a
to
simple screening
this.
too. It's such a simple screening. It's not even like,
they just put a finger up your butt.
Well, it's a whole
just like
scope. I mean,
yeah, true. I'm making it very, very simple
more than
for
a finger.
people.
But yeah, so there's a lot of guys with cancer, and if you follow their page, you'll see they talk about all of the people who have passed away from all some very rare cancers. Lung cancer is Ron Schurer, who was just awarded the Medal of Honor. Was it last year? He ended up dying a few months later from lung cancer.
Jeez.
In his, in his 30s, and it's like never smoked.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
How are most people over there getting colon cancer?
Mm-hmm.
What is that coming from? People from overseas.
Like, why is it in your colon as opposed to somewhere else in your body?
No, I guess what's causing it, like the colon cancer.
Any toxins, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean that's the theory is like these, what we were breathing in or carcinogens, right? So cancer causing, products, whatever. So when they get burned, those fumes go into the air. We're breathing them in. So, these are things that are you're not going to see the effect usually right away, right? It's going to be something that maybe happens down the road. And so she's trying to bring a lot of awareness to this subject. And there are other groups that are doing it, but they're the only ones that have actual medical people that are researching this, that are nurses, doctors, and so it's a good foundation to support. And they help a lot of people too that who have cancer and can't get the care, the treatment. So they'll send them to treatment, they'll pay for it, they'll pay for travel expenses and that type of thing.
Awesome.
So,
yeah, that is.
Yeah.
It's kind of like what happened post 9/11. Like there was that big push to get people, a lot of like the first responders and everything that were clearing the rubble. There was obviously a lot of carcinogens in the air. People, firefighters, police, people, volunteers started dying and stuff like that. Then there was a huge wave of congressional support to fund the research and support of these people. But now it's happening again in a different location, but the congressional support isn't quite there yet. And
it's not, the support isn't there because they're the cause of this.
Well, exactly. So, they don't want to address, like, it's very easy to be like 9/11 was caused by a terrorist.
Right.
And the after effects of cleaning up that was caused from the same result. But they don't want to say, oh, our policies of burning trash overseas and putting troops right next to them is the cause of this issue. Because then they're admitting fault.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Then it's a big issue.
Exactly.
So I get it, but at the same time, I don't get it.
Well, it's kind of like what's going on in the world now. So
there's
a lot of things.
True.
It's frustrating. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, are there? I know you are very active with a lot of different things. Are there any other organizations that you're kind of working with and partnering with, or that you would recommend people kind of look into and pay attention to?
So one of the things that I did, and I mentioned Iraq, is there's another organization, the Global Surgical Medical Support Group, who does nonprofit work overseas. And it's a group of nurses, doctors, medics, who do have the capability of standing up a Rule 2 or Rule 3. But what they've been doing right now is a lot of work in Kurdistan and helping the Kurds over there and teaching a lot of medicine. So they'll go into the university there and help teach their doctors, nurses. I was part of a team that helped the military side of it and taught advanced life support to them. That was really good for me because right after I got out, was again another point where I wouldn't say I was like depressed or anything, but I had about a 3-month span of, just being lost and like, who the hell am I? What am I? When you know nothing but the military since the day, you're done with high school and that's your whole adult life. And for me, it was almost 24 years total. I remember waking up the first day and was like, okay, what do I do now? I mean, it was a really weird feeling. And I'd never really thought it was going to happen to me, but it did. So that was it lasted 3 or 4 months of just feeling like I was kind of lost and wandering around and trying to figure out where my place was exactly. And GSMSG had a deployment going to Iraq. So got on board with that. And, people that I'd never met before, we all met at the airport in Erbil. And just having that familiarity, because they're all mostly veterans too. Being around military people again and just noticing that there is a difference in mindset and the way we operate and the way we think. And just when we met right there in the airport, we just started talking like we were all old friends and known each other for years. It was really strange and it was really good for me because it just kind of brought me back to I guess not feeling so lost and having that sense of purpose of what we were about to do. So it was a great, and he Aaron, he's the president of the organization, he likes to hire veterans or have veterans involved because he knows like that's a huge thing too, is that transition phase. He gets a lot of veterans that are just kind of like, I need to have purpose back in my life. And so doing stuff like that and then being around other people in the military or who had been in the military, it really helps a lot. I mean, I think it's good for people to do that. So that was a great experience to be able to do that and be part of it.
Well, it's such an important aspect of being in the military that you're right. It creates a void the second you are separated, is that like that interpersonal connection with a lot of people who have similar mindsets or drive or, mission focus or whatever it is, humor, the same type of crude humor or things like that. Like you can instantly connect with those people, and you absolutely do not get that out in the civilian world. It's just, whether it's not PC or it's not like, I don't know, it's just a different mentality. Like I need to clock in and clock out at a certain time. Like it's very structured differently. And so it's so easy to just reconnect with people who've served.
It is different. And for me, I do have that weird sense of humor or that dry, dark side sense of humor. I don't get offended. I'm usually the offender is what I always say, because I hang around a lot of guys because I feel more comfortable around men. Probably because of what I have done in the communities that I was in was just always around men. And so I'm a lot more relaxed. So I'm just used to, the jokes and the quote unquote locker room talk. It doesn't bother me a lot, or at all. And I usually am the person who's, saying stuff that's probably not appropriate.
You're probably saying the worst.
Yeah. And being around Marines for a lot of my careers, you get used to like a different sense of humor. And so like anytime I'm with a group of guys now that don't really know me, I can tell they're like sort of tiptoeing around with how they talk. And I'm like, please, like, don't filter yourself around me, because I'm probably more the offensive person here in this group. But I do notice when you're in the civilian sector around, civilians who haven't served, I tend to forget that. And I'll start talking how I normally talk and see like the shock on people's faces. And I'm like, oh.
You're like, oh, I forgot who I'm talking to.
Like,
oops, let's rewind the conversation we just had and forget
it. Yeah. So
you
like,
mentioned,
I guess that's not appropriate.
you mentioned
even stuff I post on my Instagram. I sometimes second guess myself because I'm like, to me, it's like, oh, this is funny, or like, this is no big deal. And then I'll get comments or like people reply that's like, like, I can't believe you posted that or what. I'm like, really? I don't think it was that bad, but
Nah, just post what you want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm really at that mindset where I don't give a shit. Like, this is me.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have my Instagram is not, I purposefully don't do like ambassador stuff and all that crap because I'm like, this is my page. Like, I'm not trying to have someone tell me what to do or how to post or how I should act. If you don't like what you see, then just move on. It's easy. Unfollow.
Yeah. Unfollow. Yep.
You don't want to become like a bro vet and, represent all that.
No, I've turned down. I do a lot with like Black Rifle Coffee, and I love those guys. I think they're amazing. And they actually, they offered for like, hey, if you want to rep, and I was like, no. So they kind of make fun of me. It's like, with that stuff. But I'm just like, I just don't. I want to be genuine, and I want to, I support you. I'm around you because I like you, or I like your product, or whatever. I like your foundation. I agree with what you're doing, that type of thing. But I don't. People fall into this, making money and, feeling like they have this image they have to uphold, or, have no interest in that. So I've lived under someone's thumb for my entire life, whether it was my parents and then the military. I'm going to do what I'm going to do at this point. So, and I rely on nobody, no one's income. This is me. I'm a nurse. I can do, I work anywhere, do whatever I want. So I don't rely on anything that in regard to social media. So, and that's the way I want it.
Well, you mentioned before that you had kind of like a hiatus, 3-4 month period. Do you think that, because obviously we know that, you're very active, you work out a lot, you skydive, you do like long range, shooting. Was that were those motivating factors that were kind of like you just piecing together yourself again, if that makes sense?
So, I mean, maybe that is my mental health issues. I don't know, because you look at my life and it's like, what is wrong with this person? I call it the midlife crisis, because I'll be 45 this year. So I'm like, wow, that shit's real. That midlife crisis thing. It's like this sudden need to like do everything right now, everything I've ever wanted to do. But yeah, when I got out, I was doing the skydiving thing, and then I started learning how to fly helicopters, and then the long range stuff. And I'm like, wow, could I have picked anything, the most expensive hobbies in the world? Like, let's do it all right now. And then the working out thing, my personality, I love to be challenged. Like, I feel like things aren't worth doing unless I am challenged by it.
Yeah.
That 100%. Includes working out as well, because I am not that person that can just go to a gym and do the same thing over and over again. Like, there has to be a purpose or a challenge, or like the one I'm doing right now. It's the Alpha Country. So he is a special forces guy, and he's got this workout program, and it's really for people who want to go to selection. But really? Me in my 40s, I'm like, let me try this out. So
it's not too late.
Yeah. Not that I want to go to selection, but I was just like, oh, this looks like very challenging. Let's see if I can do this right now in this time of my life. And it is very challenging, but I love that. I look at the workout every day and I'm like, shit, this is gonna suck. But I'm just, if I work out and I'm not feeling like I'm gonna die or crawling out of the gym or my garage where I've been doing most of my workouts, I just don't feel like I got anything out of it. And so kind of gotten to a point there where I'm like, this is a little excessive, because like I've been burning 1,700 calories in just activity alone a day, like 3,000 to 4,000 calories total. And I'm like, This is a little bit a lot. Because I'll do like the other day, it was Murph was the workout for the program. So did Murph at 3:00 in the afternoon, it's blazing hot. And then I go to my spin class after, and I'm like, who does this shit? And then I'm like, where did I get the energy? But, I started, if you, again, follow me, I started on the hormone replacement therapy, testosterone replacement. And it definitely has changed, like just changed a lot for me, mentally, physically, everything. So that is one of the things I'm an advocate for, because I really feel I got into hormone therapy because, one, I feel like having your hormones when they're off, and we are seeing a lot of young guys with their testosterone just in the tank, like double digits, which is super low for men. Yeah. And it's a question, right? It's like, why are these 20 and 30-year-olds have like this low of testosterone? And the symptoms that go along with that mimic a lot of like the PTSD or the mental health symptoms. So being depressed, being tired, not having any energy. I started like looking into that a lot because I was like, the the doctors are so quick to just throw all these medications at people without really looking into it. And the first time I saw it was a friend of mine who is active duty special forces was posting some stuff that I was getting a little concerned about. I was like, dude, are you okay? And he was just like, I just kind of feel like out of my head. I don't know what's going on. And, I had him run through like what he was doing, who we saw. And his general practitioner, PA, started him on antidepressants, started him on, that made him feel like and this has been the story over and over again as I started asking more people. It's like, oh, here's an antidepressant. And I'm like, that's not something you're just like, oh, here you go,
Super bad for you.
Yeah. And then no follow-up with the mental health professional, no follow-up from them. Nobody's like tracking what's going on. And then it's like, oh, I feel tired. So then they go back and they're, oh, here's some Adderall to pick you up. Right.
Jeez.
Now, like within a span of a few weeks, you're on 2 different medications that affect your thoughts and your mental health. Right. Then they're like, well, I can't go to sleep. Oh, here's some Ambien. Oh, and by the way, here's some Xanax to bridge all this. And then of course they're self-medicating at home, right? Alcohol, whatever else. Now this person's like a bloody fucking mess because they're on like 4 or 5 different.
You're on uppers and downers all day long.
Yeah. Right. So somebody who now was not suicidal is now suicidal because of all these chemicals and medications that they're doing that's affecting, all this, the stuff that's going on in their head. And then a lot of them are like, oh, I just don't like feeling this way. So they stop cold turkey. They'll stop the antidepressant cold turkey, which it clearly states if do not stop cold turkey because it increases suicidal ideation. So it's like, man, holy shit. So I'm like, how often does this happen? And I started asking, and it's just over and over and over. This is what they do. And then a good friend of mine, who's a mental health nurse practitioner, who's with the Oscar teams with the Marine Corps, I asked her about this. And my theory is, I bet a lot of the suicides were caused by this, not because they were actual suicidal, but we made them suicidal, or the doctors did. People get pissed at me a lot when I say that, because it's like, well, you can't, like, the doctors are trying hard. And I'm like, no, they need to take accountability for this.
Yeah,
like there is an accountability issue here.
Well, coming from a nursing profession, I'm actually interested on your thought on that, because I'm sure a lot of doctors are trained on different medications in the way that it treats different symptoms.
Yeah.
But do you receive the same? And I don't know, like if you've gotten the same level of training or whatever. This is just me being ignorant, I guess. But like, do they train them also on like, okay, you have Xanax that treats some of the depressive symptoms and things like that, but these are the after effects in other ways that you need to treat it that are more of like eating healthy, sleeping well, like all these other things? Or do they just say, here's what you need to do if you hear these symptoms, give them this?
From what I'm being told and with all the people I've talked to, is that that's just, here you go. Here's a prescription for this. There is no time. And, a lot of it, again, just to be the devil's advocate for the doctors, is they don't get a lot of time to see their patients. They get like 10-minute windows. So to talk about nutrition and good health and all this other stuff takes a while, right? And they don't have the time. So it's
a psychologist.
Yeah. But there's no referral to these people. There's no, it's just, here's all these meds. And again, it happens over and over again. So I asked my friend who's a mental health nurse practitioner, I'm like, how often, here's my theory. I think this is what's going on. And how often did you see it? You were with the Marines. And she was like, oh my God, you have no idea how many times I've had to undo that mess that these doctors create, because they never needed to be on it in the first place. And we've made them into this freaking head case because of all these different medications that they're now on. So she will undo them. She was like, they need to test their hormones. They need to do MRIs, because she's like, I found 7 pituitary tumors, which affects your hormones. Right. So that's why I became a real big advocate for the hormone therapy. Because I'm like, that's something very simple. Test their hormones, see where they're at, do the replacement therapy. They don't want to do this. And a lot of even on the civilian side, that they don't want to do this. And so I asked my hormone doctor, I was like, why are they so reluctant to test? And he's just like, well, one, I mean, there's no money in it. If you have healthy people walking around, they're not coming, they're not getting the healthcare. The insurance companies don't like it. So yeah, that's, one of the problems. So a lot of times you have to go to a specialist and pay out of pocket to get that therapy. The other problem is if you do find a doctor who will test for it, they don't know how to treat it. So, for instance, the range for a male is 300 to 800, depending on, what range you're looking at. If a guy, and I've had people reach out because I've been posting a lot about this, and they'll reach out and they'll say, I was 330 or something like that. So the doctor's like, oh, well, you're in range. And I'm like, but the 330 and 800 is really different. And so my hormone doctors will be like, you probably were operating optimally at 800 or 700, right?
Wow.
So being at 300, you're really low. So what the hormone specialists do, which I'm actually working with another guy from the Frank Institute, Dr. Frank, he does a lot, just another little kicker, because he'll do a lot for people who can't get their primary care doc to help them. So he'll do telehealth. He's out of Wilmington, North Carolina. But he will do the telehealth stuff, and he doesn't charge as much as normal hormone doctors do. So he was actually featured on the Drinking Bros podcast to help people with that. Yeah. So I've been referring a lot of people to him, but he was also telling me, he's like, what we do is we find what's optimal for you. And like for me, for instance, women our range is like 50 to 70. I wasn't even registering. I was like barely a 1, I think. And he was like, somebody who's been athletic all their life, who's been, in the military and doing physical stuff, you probably were at the high end of the range. So what my hormone doctor is got me, his target actually for me is 100. And I do the pellet therapy because the pellets are about 3 to 4 months. And so you have a peak and then you come down, and it's like, if I get you up high, then when you come down, you're still at that higher range for the testosterone.
So he does men and women then?
Yes. Yep.
Like basically finds out where you're lacking and how to balance it.
Right. And the thing is that a lot of women don't understand that we need testosterone. Women don't ever think about that. So when I started posting about it, I had so many women come out and were like, I have the same symptoms.
I don't want to be a man.
Yeah.
I don't want my voice to change. I don't want all these things
every time I talk to women about it, it's like,
bit.
Oh no, I don't want to look like a guy. And I'm like, do I look like a guy? I don't think I look like a guy or sound like one, hopefully. It's different than doing your own, like doing the steroids for that working out purpose versus having a specialist that's doing your labs every, 3 months or whatever, and like tracking where you are and what's optimal for you. So I have to explain all that to them. But yeah, they don't realize that, we need testosterone. Because for me, the symptoms were, just to get out of bed was effort. And I started thinking, I'm like, is it all catching up to me? Like, is it, mental health thing from what I had done? Like, I don't know. And because I was tired all the time, I was just like, felt like the blues, just, I guess depressed, brain fog. I mean, was like, what the hell? Do I have cancer? Like, what the hell's going on with me? And then started doing research about the testosterone and the hormone therapy. So decided to find a doctor, I wasn't even registering. As soon as I started getting treatment, I'm a little concerned because I'll work out. Like I do Murph spin class, and I'm like, I could still like continue working out. Like the energy is just crazy and just off the chart. So
how do they adjust that? How do people bring up or lower those numbers?
How do
their testosterone? Like if people are lacking, how do they bring that up then?
So like you can ask your doctor to test, but like I said, a lot of times your primary care doctors don't want to do it, or and then if they do it, they don't know how to treat it, or they just test testosterone. But there's so many other hormones. You have estrogen, progesterone. This is for men and women. Cortisol levels, your thyroid. There's all these other things, and so a hormone doctor is going to do a huge panel of all of that stuff. Cortisol, estrogen, progesterone. For me, I'm 45, so I was a little concerned, like, okay, menopause days are coming soon. So how are all those doing? And my estrogen, progesterone were great and perfect, but my testosterone was just gone. And so it's like, okay, well, why are all these guys experiencing this? Or why, men and women are experiencing this? And a lot of times they're in these high stress jobs. So you have like the first responders, you have law enforcement, you have military guys. And when you're constantly operating at this level and you're just going, that can burn through your testosterone and your storage. So,
I think outside of all the other factors too, there's the argument now that at least for men, it might be for women too. I'd have to find out more, but like pornography reduces men's testosterone as well.
Well, if that's the case, then that would explain a lot of the Marine.
You're at a peak, like
yeah.
You're kind of like in that moment for 5 minutes.
Or the masturbation? Like was
Well, I mean, those are psychopaths that just watch porn that aren't masturbating. How do you watch something like every day and not do anything about it?
True.
I'm saying the people that are like constantly masturbating over it, but there's a whole mindset behind it too.
But here's the other thing too, is a lot of people I've talked to were like, oh no, my testosterone's good because my libido is good. And it's like, no. That does not go hand in hand. What people don't understand. You could have a good libido and your testosterone is still low. Yeah. So that is not, necessarily the only symptom that you would have.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's very interesting. And I've been working with the Frank Institute on this a lot too. And then just because I get a lot of people who DM me when I started posting about it and they're like, I can't get my doctor to test. What do I do? So now I have a place that I can refer people to. And like I said, he'll do telehealth. So
it'd be super interesting to find out more about that for people that we talk to and everything. Cause I mean, you said Wilmington, I live 30 minutes from there.
Yeah. So you could, you can make an appointment and go. Yeah. And he does other kind of therapies, IV therapy, like a bunch of other stuff that if you're close by that you can go to. So yeah.
That's very cool.
Yep.
Well, you tied into a bunch of different things, and it sounds like, it's a lot of like watching out, making sure that veterans are doing better, being better for themselves and everything, and checking to make sure that everybody's healthy and happy, especially after service. But, through all that experience, what has been kind of some of, I guess, your takeaways or advice you would have for veterans that are separating and kind of trying to fill that void or find their purpose again?
The big thing is prepare for it ahead of time. I did not do that. And I'm kicking myself over that. I literally worked up to the day, my last day, where I was at my desk and my guys were like, what do you mean you're not going to be here Monday? I'm like, oh, that's my last day in the Navy. But one is because I had the training program that I was working on, and that was my baby, and it was really hard to let go. So it wasn't like I was this huge workaholic, but I wanted to make sure I had that turned over to the right people. But two, I just didn't think about all the shit that you have to do leading up. And, and you see people like take that year before they retire, before they get out, and they're doing all this stuff, and you kind of make fun of them. It's because like, oh yeah, you're like, basically slacking off. No, that's a real thing. Like there are so many things you have to do, with getting your medical records straight when you do the VA thing. So I got pushed back to the end of the list for the VA rating because you were supposed to do it 90 days before getting out to be at the top of the list. And I didn't do it till I got and then I was missing all kinds of stuff. And so it was just, I was like, okay, well, I just screwed myself. So
there's your 3 months of feeling in that empty space.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it was just, I did have a lot of catching up to do in those 3 months, but yes, take that time to get all of your stuff right and really take a step back from what you're doing. And I think a lot of people who are especially passionate for what they're doing, and at the time I was very passionate with that program, you feel like almost, oh, it won't survive without me. And it's like, the military is going to go on without you. Like there's going to be somebody behind you that's going to replace you. Like it's all going to go on. Don't worry about that. Get your shit straight, because that transition phase is a real thing. Start preparing and do the classes that they tell you to go to. A lot of it's, kind of boring, whatever, but they do have a lot of good information, such as the resources for later, whether it be the VA stuff or job resources and stuff like that. And just really figure out what you want to do when you get out before you get out, and start, applying to jobs or whatever it is that you're thinking of, or, getting your school stuff straight. So when you do get out, you can roll right into school. Prepare the more prepared you are mentally and just having things set up, the better it's going to be. Because then, you get out and then you roll right into it. And I do say, take time off for yourself too. I didn't do that. I rolled right into a job. Actually, I had a job before I got out. I was working for the Joint Trauma Services. So I never even had the time to just, you know, sort of process and think about what was going on. So I was like juggling all the, and then piled myself up with all like the hobbies, and I had a job and I had this and whatever going. And it's like, I describe it as I piled my plate up with all this shit, a lot of it being, you know, unnecessary and not helpful for me, that I am just now 2 years out clearing that plate off. And I'm just now feeling like, okay, I know what I want to do. I know where, you know, what is good for me, like where my direction is going. So, you know,
that's awesome.
it was this fear of, you know, not being relevant, I guess, after I got out. So like, let me just pile it all on and, you know, make myself important, I guess.
Well, as we start to wrap, I'm curious, what are you currently working on? And obviously I'll link your social media for people that are interested in, you know, following you or finding out more about the organizations and everything that you partner with. But what are some of the things that you're working on now that you can tell more people about?
So right now I still do stuff with HunterSeven, and they've expanded to the point where they're actually doing events in different locations. Like they had one in San Antonio and they had one in North Carolina. There's one coming up in September. And it's where they get, you know, the veterans get together. They have all these people. They have people talking and keynote speakers and that type of thing. So spreading awareness and that type of stuff. So still doing stuff with them. I still do stuff with GSMSG when that comes up. That was kind of put on hold because the COVID stuff with traveling was difficult. For me now, I do some contract work with a couple companies, and then I work in hospitals, but I work per diem. So it's on my own time, and I set my schedule, which has been great. And then still just working on like the long range rifle stuff, which is so frustrating, but it's so much fun. I love it, but it is so frustrating because
I think people will enjoy the photo that we took of you though, because obviously it was you shooting, you know, with the gun that you had, and I don't think a lot of people realize that I sat you in a rattlesnake den.
Yeah, you did.
Like we found old rattlesnake sheds and everything, like right underneath her.
Yeah,
that's good.
He was trying to get me killed.
Yeah, it was fun though. Like we took your truck out there, and just kind of set up and took your photo. And that was I remember it was hot that day.
It was really hot. Yeah.
I think it was. When did I come out? Was it
January?
It was January, but it was like 92 degrees.
Whoa.
Yeah, I think we were having a heat wave.
It was a random heat wave, and her and I were both like sweating our asses off for like 10 minutes out there. And we were like,
you went from negative like 15 degrees to 92 degrees in like a week.
Yeah. Maybe even less than that. And you were wearing a beanie and everything. And I was like, man, that's going to be hot. But I think people really enjoy listening to this episode. They get to know you a little bit more. Obviously, they'll see your story in the book too. But I personally, and I know Dan, can't thank you enough for finally coming on our show and being a part of it.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks.
Appreciate
and we'll be in touch, and I'll make sure to link all your social. So if people listening want to go check it out, if they want to go check out HunterSeven Foundation, they'll have all the links to that.
Okay, awesome.
So awesome.
Sounds
Thanks,
good.
Nikki.